apparent defeat of gun control at the national level, many pro-gun control advocates are now turning their attention to the states. New York, Connecticut, Colorado all passed tough gun regulations in the aftermath of Newtown, but many of those laws now face legal challenges. Well, tonight we continue our week-long series defending the Second Amendment with David Kopel. He's the attorney leading that Colorado lawsuit. He's also the research director of the Independence Institute and author of The Truth About Gun Control. David, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So Colorado last month, Governor Hickenlooper signed into law 3 new gun control restrictions. I have a full screen for our audience to look at home. It's a ban on magazines holding more than 15 rounds, mandatory background check for all private gun sales, and a fee to perform background checks. Why is this objectionable to you?
Well, there's not going to be any lawsuit on the fee for the background checks. The lawsuit, which has not yet been filed, is going to point out, for example, that the background checks bill is not just about the selling of guns, it's about temporary transfers. So if your friend from out of town comes to visit you for, say, 4 days and borrows your gun to go hunting, then both of you are criminals if you just let him borrow your hunting rifle for 4 days. And likewise, the magazine ban actually bans almost all magazines because of its poorly written definitions. It bans magazines above 15 rounds by saying above 15 rounds, and it bans magazines less than 15 rounds with this language about any magazine that's designed to be readily converted, whatever that means, to hold more than 15. According to the sponsor of that bill, Representative Rhonda Fields, that outlaws every magazine that has a removable base plate, which is to say all of them.
Got it. So a spokesperson for Colorado Ceasefire, who's on the other side of this issue, he's also the father of someone who was killed at Columbine. He says, look, the Supreme Court case, D.C. versus Heller, which you, by the way, argued and had a spectacular win on, he says that the Supreme Court, while it grants an individual right to gun ownership, restrictions are allowable, and he supports these Colorado restrictions. Is that a fair point?
Well, of course, restrictions are allowable, and as you say, I was on the oral argument team in the U.S. Supreme Court on D.C. v. Heller, so I think I knew the case a little better than this fellow does, who's not a lawyer. The Supreme Court certainly says that some kinds of gun controls are permissible, but what it says is you cannot ban guns or accessories that are typically used by law-abiding citizens for legitimate purposes, and the magazine ban certainly does that.
So explain to me why you see this as a civil rights or a constitutional issue rather than one of just clarifying the language and going through the legislative process.
Well, the language is these bills are horribly misdrafted because they're based on cookie-cutter language thought up by the Bloomberg lobby and pushed all over the country. So even if there were no Second Amendment right to arms, people have under the 14th Amendment right of due process a right to laws that are clear and that tell them what is illegal and what is not. And these laws fail that standard as well.
Got it. So 43 sheriffs have joined in this lawsuit, 43 sheriffs out of 62 in the state of Colorado, so that's an overwhelming majority. But meanwhile, you and I both know that a lot of gun control advocates, they like to argue that, hey, law enforcement likes gun control because it keeps guns out of the hands of criminals. Explain to me why sheriffs are on your side.
Well, sheriffs do like gun controls that keep guns out of the hands of criminals. Most of them don't like laws that keep guns out of the hands of the law-abiding, that make it harder for law-abiding people to defend themselves, or that are unenforceable by the sheriffs. Back to this thing we talked about, the magazines that are designed to be converted. There's no way a citizen who's trying to obey the law or a sheriff's deputy who's trying to enforce the law has any possible way of knowing what the design intention was of whoever made the magazine. So these laws are across the board unenforceable, and because they're unenforceable, they poison the relationship between law-abiding citizens and law enforcement, and in that way seriously harm law enforcement.
So Dave, really quickly before we go, we only have a couple of seconds. As we mentioned, you were part of the oral arguments in that successful Supreme Court case in 2008, D.C. versus Heller. When do you expect to file suit in Colorado, and how far do you think this case will go?
Hopefully we'll be filing within a few weeks, and the case will go as far as it needs to go to vindicate the rights of the law-abiding citizens and the law enforcement community of the state of Colorado.
All right, David, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.